Or disintegration. We have been talking about it since the days of African independence. Unite or fall. Projects to bring about integration have mobilized generation after generation of Africans, from federalists to those in favor of economic unions. But the Pan-African dream never really got much further than the stage of slogans and political speeches. Nowadays, without any tangible results to show for so much effort, many young people have lost faith. So where is the integration process now? What are the obstacles and what can be done to make integration mechanisms credible once more? The subject gave rise to heated debate at the Houphouët-Boigny Foundation in Yamoussoukro. The event was organized by the Initiative Africa Group, a think tank promoting discussions on the key issues facing the continent. David Thiombiano reports.
Over the past decade, there has been no shortage of fervent advocates for regional integration on the continent. But as time goes by, there is a growing feeling of disillusion, especially amongst the younger generation. Whichever way you look at it, the road to integration is long, and the grand project for a united Africa is stuck in a rut. The question asked by the Group Initiative Africa think tank at its fourth conference last month in Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast, was simple. Are we heading for integration or disintegration?
As you know, the World Trade Organization, which draws up multilateral trade agreements, is in gridlock because of the disputes between developed and emerging nations. If African nations cannot decide on a unified position on the question of the various privileges and advantages, we will have a hard time withstanding the negative effects likely to result from this multilateral gridlock.
Despite the existence of 30 or more organizations promoting integration across the continent, intra-African trade still stands at just 15%.
15% is really not much. In Europe, trade between EU nations is around 70%. The statistics seem to suggest that Africa hasn't got a lot to exchange with Africa. But in the field, it's a different story. A lot of the cross-border trade involving items such as cattle and foodstuffs is not taken into account.
Who, if anyone, is to blame? Is it the governments who don't honor their commitments? Is it the financial sector that has spent decades focusing on funding import-export ventures rather than investing in the manufacture and processing of local produce? Whoever is at fault, the direct result is that the main source of revenue for African economies comes from taxation and earnings from exports of fresh products and mineral ores. In a nutshell, a rent economy that creates few jobs.
For decades, African trade was heavily dependent on extra-African trade, exchanges between Africa and the rest of the world, in other words. This is partly because foreign banks have no hesitation drawing up letters of credit for their importers, but have difficulties providing finance for intra-African trade. I'd say their evaluation of the risk was unrealistically high.
So the bankers hold one of the keys to unlocking intra-African trade. Specialist studies estimate that 120 billion are needed to finance manufacturing trade, and 93 billion a year over the next 10 years to establish the infrastructure required for trade between African nations. The amounts concerned are astronomical, and clearly no single entity can bear such a burden.
We could finance intra-African trade with electronic transactions. These are very effective in Kenya, for example, with M-Pesa. But when you go from one country to another in the sub-regions, the rules are not the same, and there is a lack of compatibility. I think central banks need to be encouraged to work together to establish a clearing system of interbank compensation.
Successful integration and successful enterprises go hand in hand. With her company, M&A Capital, Aïssatou Leblond has set up businesses across the continent. Her aim is to sow the seeds for the African multinationals that will conquer world markets. This young business leader is in no doubt. Integration will mean more employment opportunities for young people.
A lot is being said about ways of mobilizing migrant savings. One thing you can be sure of is that the day we have multinationals quoted on our stock exchanges will be the day you see Africans the world over being the first to invest.
In 2015, the third initiative Africa Group Conference focused on the key role played by training and employment in making sure young people can fulfill their potential and contribute to society, rather than becoming a destabilizing influence. The question up for debate was, African youth, a time bomb or the chance of a lifetime? One of the conclusions of this fourth conference was that more integration means more jobs and training for young people.
We spoke about youth mobility. Basically, if we had greater integration, there would be no barriers or borders stopping young people with certain skills, and who don't find work in their own country, finding work worthy of their skills in other countries in the sub-region. Another subject we discussed was the idea of a system, not unlike the European Erasmus program, where students are free to go to universities in other countries. Their own countries don't provide the courses that they want to study.
The awareness that there is an urgent need for integration is widespread. The African Union's decision to set up a continental free trade zone by the end of 2017 is clearly a move in the right direction, with mammoth trade agreements being negotiated in recent years by financial superpowers such as the US and China. The price Africa would pay for not taking action would be prohibitive. As always, the best negotiating position is a united one, especially as the general consensus is that the economic partnership agreements need to be renegotiated with the European Union. Meanwhile, ECOWAS, a model of integration with its 16 member states, is gearing up to take on Brussels.
Of these 16 countries, 12 have least developed country status and do not enjoy the advantages in terms of multilateral trade. The EPA will cancel out these advantages because they'll have to open their markets to EU trade.
Marcel de Souza, the new ECOWAS president, insists that priority should be given to infrastructure projects such as the Lagos-Dakar motorway, the Cotonou-Niamey-Ouagadougou-Abidjan rail link, as well as interconnected electricity supply networks in West Africa. However, the often touted promise of free movement for people and goods, a move that would considerably improve exchanges of all kinds, has yet to materialize. Similarly, it now looks like the dream of a common currency has taken a 10-year rain check. Not surprisingly, the fate of the CFA franc was also a popular topic.
Une monnaie est faite pour aller dans le cadre d'une politique. Et donc,
its importance must not be overlooked. Apart from its symbolic element, there is the question of the actual denomination, minting the money here in Africa and having a free-floating exchange rate with the euro. This is feasible. We just need to go about it step by step. We want to avoid the kind of shocks we saw with the first currency devaluations we had. Businesses are the heart of this whole process.
But insecurity is another obstacle. What is the point of building roads if they can't be used safely? As a result of this situation, businesses are leaving high-risk areas. Security specialists called for more cooperation at a national level to tackle increasing cross-border criminality and terrorist threats.
I believe we need a common awareness of just what is at stake here. We have to take the same approach to evaluating these challenges. Pooling our efforts does not mean just combining army units and artillery. There is also the question of strategy. We need to have a joint strategy and approach. A defense is not just about weapons. It is a global, economic, and cultural approach. So I would say this process of pooling our resources is part of the drive for greater integration.
Integration or disintegration? The analyses and propositions made by participants and a wide range of independent experts at the Yamoussoukro Conference will be presented in a white paper published by L'Harmattan, Ivory Coast. Participants agreed that this year's conference had fulfilled its mission to promote debate and discussions and propose innovative solutions for the economic and political players at national level. We can only hope that those concerned will leave their egos to one side in opting for the solutions most likely to accelerate the process of integration on the continent.